Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, then hi. I'm really new to YouTube, so kind of bear with me. What I'm going to be talking about today is something that I'm really interested in. I talk about this to friends, family, pretty much anyone that I come into contact with. I've always really been interested in like murder mysteries, books, TV series, films. So this is something that I'm going to really enjoy talking to you about, even though it is a really horrible subject. So this first story is about a quite famous case. This is about Jonbenet Ramsey, who's a 6-year-old girl who was killed on December 25th or 26th in 1996. Now this was the year I was born, so I was only a couple months old. I was about 7 months old when this happened, and it happened in America. Now Jonbenet Ramsey was a pageant girl who did loads of pageants. She was quite well known for doing these pageants. At the time of her death, Jonbenet's family included her father, Jonbenet, who she actually got her name from, her mother Patsy, and her brother Burke, who was 9 at the time. So the official cause of death for Jonbenet was, I'm really going to try and pronounce this properly, asphyxiation by strangulation, and this one's so difficult, cranial cerebrotrauma, which was the official cause of death. So basically that means she had blunt force trauma to the head and then she was strangled. Now on the 25th of December, the Ramseys went to a friend's house. It was either for a party or a Christmas dinner, and they arrived home about 10 p.m. Now they say that Jonbenet fell asleep in the car, so they picked her up out of the car and took her straight to bed. And then at 5 a.m. the next morning, so on Boxing Day as we call it in England,
911 emergency. Police. What's going on? 515th Street. What's going on there, ma'am? We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please. Explain to me what's going on, okay? There's a note left and our daughter's gone. A note was left and your daughter is gone? How old is your daughter? 6 years old. She's gone. 6 years old. How long ago was it? I don't know. I just found the note. And my daughter's gone. Does it say who took her? What? Does it say who took her? I don't know. There's a ransom note here. It's a ransom note? It says SBTC. Victory. Please. Okay, what's your name? Are you Patsy Ramsey? I'm the mother. Oh my God. Please. I'm sending an officer over, okay? Please. Do you know how long she's been gone? No, I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please. Okay, well, there's somebody. I am, honey. Please. Take a deep breath, please, okay? Hurry. Patsy.
as you can hear from that phone call, Patsy's clearly in hysterics. Obviously you would be if your child had gone missing, but there's around 6 seconds at the end of the phone call which the police actually got their hands on, and the 911 operator who had been on the phone to Patsy was still on the phone to Patsy, and Patsy had obviously thought that she'd hung up. And there's about 6 seconds of just complete change in Patsy's demeanour. She stops being hysterical, she stops crying, and she is appeared to say, okay, we called the police, what do we do now? There was a police investigation into this phone call where they actually spoke to the 911 operator, and she confirmed that there was an immediate change in the way that Patsy was speaking, in her whole demeanour. So at the end of the phone call, the police enhanced those 6 seconds and appeared to hear 3 different voices, which were Patsy, Jonbenet and Burke. Now this is really damning evidence against the family, as in an interview with the police, the Ramsey parents both said that Burke was asleep for the entire time. At 5:59 after the phone call, the Boulder police came to the house to start their investigation. What's really weird is the Ramseys invited all their friends and all their family to the house. Now this was really damning to the investigation, and the Boulder police actually didn't stop them from being in the house. When the Boulder police were searching the house, so were the friends and the family, which completely contaminated the entire house. I actually think the Boulder police handled it really, really badly, because by allowing the friends and the family to stay in the house and to investigate with the police, it actually contaminated most of the house and most of the evidence. A big reason why nobody has been caught for this crime. Now, in the phone call, Patsy described a ransom note which was left at the house. Now, this ransom note is one of the strangest pieces of evidence, because it's 2.5 pages long, and not even just that, when the kidnappers or whoever, you know, did the crime got to the house, they actually did a practice one. So they did a practice ransom note, and then they actually wrote the ransom note as well. CBS did a documentary on the Jonbenet Ramsey crime, and they actually timed 4 different people writing out this letter, and each one came out around 20 minutes. And bear in mind that these people obviously didn't know what they were writing when they got to the house to write the ransom note, so it would have taken them even longer. So to have written 2 of those, it seems like a really, really long time to have taken time to write this letter for a kidnapping. The ransom note was actually written on Patsy's notepad and using her own pen, and then was placed back where the family kept it in their family office. So this ransom note is such a frustrating but such an important part of the investigation, because obviously from the kidnappers it's such an important piece of evidence. It gives us a lot of clues about what happened, but at the same time it completely makes no sense. There are lines in the ransom note that are written from films, so they've obviously watched films on murders or kidnappings, and they've taken these specific lines to kind of make the ransom note sound a bit more, you know, believable. So in the ransom note they actually asked for $118,000, which seems like a really specific amount of money, especially seeing as it was extremely close to the bonus that Jonbenet had got from work that Christmas. So it's believed that maybe a family member or someone close to the family kind of did the crime because they knew that the family had that amount of money in the house. The ransom note actually started with this phrase. I'm going to read it off my phone. A small group that represents a foreign fraction. Now I find that such a weird way to start a ransom note, because they're actually making themselves sound so much less of a threat. If you were doing a kidnapping and you wanted all this money off these people, you would want to make yourselves sound scary, but they actually called themselves a small group, which is just absolutely strange to me. The family also ignored the instructions on the note which said don't call the police, which I find quite strange, because I know how some people be like, no, I want to call the police, find out what happened straight away, I'm not giving in to these people. But at the same time, I think personally I would do what the ransom note had said. So the Ramseys completely just ignored everything on the note. In the ransom note, obviously that word foreign was at the front, and specialists, when analysing the note, actually said that a lot of complicated words were spelt completely correctly, but then smaller, easier words like business were spelt incorrectly, and it kind of seemed to the police that they were trying to make it look like English wasn't their native language, so that they couldn't spell when they were getting quite a lot of the bigger words right. The handwriting in the note was really sloppy as well, so at the beginning of the note it kind of seemed like the person was really trying to change their handwriting, but as the note went through, old habits kind of kicked in, and a lot of normal handwriting kind of came back into it, and it kind of got sloppy with loads of different types of handwriting within the note. The police actually took samples and took them to professionals of Patsy's and Jonbenet's handwriting. Jonbenet was actually ruled out. They said it could not have been him at all that had written the note. But Patsy wasn't ruled out. She wasn't ruled in. She wasn't ruled out. They just couldn't determine whether it was her or not. But there was quite a few similarities in what she would write, how she would write, and how the letter was written. But I just think it's really weird how the note was even written, saying that they'd kidnapped this, you know, 6-year-old girl when the body was actually still in the house. So I don't understand why the person would take the time to write that letter when the child actually hadn't been kidnapped and that she was actually dead in the house. So once everything kind of happened in the house and they'd searched around the house, John and his friend were told by the police to kind of just search around the house one more time before they kind of started searching outside of the house. And this was when the body was found. John and his friend went into the basement and actually found Jonbenet's body. Now, she had a garrote around her neck and her hands were tied behind her head, and she was covered in one of the house blankets. Now, this was really, really contaminating. The way that Jonbenet's hands were tied with her on top of her jumper, seemed that she could have easily have gotten out of it if she was alive, and she could have like struggled out of it. So a lot of people think that it was done after she had died to kind of make it seem that she was like kidnapped and put in the basement and that she died during that time. A huge contamination to the investigation was that John immediately picked up his daughter and took her into the living room and put her down on the living room table, and a family friend put another blanket on top of her, which completely contaminated the entire crime scene, the house. All the friends' DNA had been on the blanket, so it kind of like it was impossible to then figure out who had been by her. They found DNA of 2 males and 1 female under her fingernails, a male's DNA in her leggings and her underwear, and Patsy's jumper also had fragments on Jonbenet, but there was so much DNA that it was so overwhelming that they couldn't actually determine any of it towards the case, because there just was so much of it, and a lot of it had deteriorated. So all the DNA that was under her fingernails, they couldn't actually determine whether it was blood, whether it was tissue, whether it was skin, or if it was just from the Christmas day with her family. The strangest thing after the body was actually found was that the Ramseys completely just stopped cooperating with the police. They didn't do any interviews for 3 weeks, until 3 weeks after their daughter had been found, and I think that's absolutely just strange. So for those 3 weeks that the Ramseys didn't talk to the police, they actually did a TV interview, which they didn't tell anyone that they were going to do. They didn't tell the border police, and they didn't tell their lawyer. They also hired a lawyer 2 hours after the body was found, which seems really strange, because that's not the first thing that you think of when something like that happens. It's just so much information, and kind of little bits of information, that this case that I could not just go over everything because I'd be sat here for hours. But one of the things that is quite a large piece of evidence is that it's believed that Jonbenet was actually sexually abused, which is absolutely disgusting if you think about the fact she was only 6. It's not a confirmed piece of evidence, but it is believed that she was sexually abused and murdered. Forensically analysed her. They kind of established that she had at some point in her life had some sexual abuse. Some people actually kind of link this to the fact that she was in the pageant business, and back in those days it kind of was a real hotbed for paedophiles to turn up to these pageants, you know, 6-year-olds and young girls and boys kind of dressed up and made to look a lot older and sexualised, and maybe it was her father who had then raped and killed her the night of her death. The first theory is actually a really ridiculous one, and you probably, if you've heard of Jonbenet, you've probably seen this on social media lately. There is actually a theory that Jonbenet is still alive and is now Katy Perry. It somehow became a theory because apparently they look alike, but it is completely ridiculous seeing as Katy Perry is 6 years older than Jonbenet would be, and Katy Perry has an entire backstory back to her childhood. This kind of surfaced because it was believed that Jonbenet wanted to become famous, and they kind of did this to kind of scratch her old pageant career. There is quite a lot of different leads to different people who are outside of the family who people think that actually killed Jonbenet. There's this one guy called Michael Helgoth, and he was actually overheard confessing to a co-worker that he had actually killed Jonbenet. But 2 months after Jonbenet's body was found, he was actually found to be hung. But a lot of people don't think that he killed himself, and that he was actually killed by his accomplice who helped him kill Jonbenet. But this one was never proven right. There was another guy called John Markar who actually admitted to killing Jonbenet, but it was proven that it was completely impossible for him to have done it, because he was actually seen in Georgia. That they have some footage of him in Georgia, but a lot of people just think that maybe he was obsessed with the case. So one of the massive things that actually makes me think that it was someone in the house that did it was the fact that the basement in which her body was found, there was a smashed window. Everyone in the family and friends knew about this smashed window. It'd been there for a few weeks, maybe months, but Jonbenet had actually said that he had just not really got round to fixing the window. He said that it was a really safe neighbourhood. The one piece of evidence that sticks out to me that it was someone in the house was the fact that there was a massive cobweb in the window, and for someone to have come into the window, they would have had to have disturbed the cobweb to get through the window, and it was completely intact. I just think it's really strange that if someone had kind of broken into the house, that they could have done it without disturbing any of the doors. There was no sign of forced entry, any of the doors, any of the windows. And I find it strange that someone would come into the house and kill someone without bringing any of their own weapons. Everything that was used by stuff in the house, and a ransom note was written with no plan. So the first theory within the family was that Burke did it. Now, when they got back from the house, Burke actually had a bowl of pineapple and some iced tea. In this pineapple, it was still left when the police came to check the house, and it had Burke's DNA and it had Patsy's DNA, but it didn't have anyone else's DNA. But when they looked into Jonbenet's body, they actually found undigested pineapple, which means that she had to have eaten some shortly before dying. Now, a lot of people think that maybe she got up in the middle of the night or whenever and saw that they were eating pineapple and reached in and picked out some, and that's how she would have got it in her belly without getting her DNA in the bowl. So a lot of people think that she did this, but got angry, picked up a flashlight and hit her over the head, because the police believe that she was hit on the head with this flashlight, because they have this flashlight and it perfectly fits and would cause the damage to Jonbenet. But nobody in the family or outside of the family claims it's theirs, so they just have this random flashlight that nobody's claiming. A year before Jonbenet actually died, Burke had actually gotten angry and lashed out at Jonbenet and hit her over the head with this golf club and actually scarred her on the face. So people do believe that it was him. The second theory within this theory is that when Jonbenet was hit over the head, she didn't actually die, and the parents thought she was dead and tried to, stage it as a kidnapping, and actually killed her in the process of making it look like she had been kidnapped and strangled. Another piece of damning information against Burke is actually something that I don't know how to feel about this one. He did his first ever interview and he did it on Dr. Phil. A lot of people think that he was really strange in this interview. I personally think he was acting a bit strange, but I know people that are the same in that situation. So he's doing this interview, he's smiling, he's laughing. Personally, to me, I find it really uncomfortable to watch the interview, but I know a lot of people that do the same thing. So I just want to quickly get into what I think. There's not really like a set theory on this, but I actually believe that her father, Jonbenet, I don't know, a lot of the evidence points to Patsy, which actually makes me think that it can't have been her. So I reckon that he may have accidentally killed her, but I actually think that there was, because of the sexual abuse claims and because of the evidence, I actually think that maybe he was sexually abusing her and that he got Patsy to help him stage the whole thing. That is personally what I think, but I would love to know what you think about this theory. If you'd like to comment below what you think about this case and any other cases that you would like me to look into. I kind of want to get into the more discreet ones, the ones that don't really have that much attention. I'd love to get into those ones and kind of talk about those ones with you. If you enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe and please like, because I'm really new to YouTube. Bye!